What was the most dangerous thing your parents made you do for their beliefs? My parents forced me to stand outside in every storm to absorb nature's power while they watched from inside the house. It started when I was 8 years old during a summer thunderstorm. My mother yanked me from my bed at 2 in the morning and dragged me to the back door. She pushed me outside in my pajamas while rain hammered the deck. My father stood behind her holding his leather journal and told me the storm would make me stronger if I let it enter my body. They locked the door and watched through the kitchen window while I stood there crying in the rain for 3 hours. My parents weren't always like this. They used to be normal accountants who complained about traffic and watched sitcoms after dinner. Then my father's brother died in a lightning strike while hiking, and something in them broke. They started reading books about electromagnetic fields and human consciousness. They joined online groups about storm energy and natural power. Within 6 months, they'd quit their jobs and moved us to this rural house in Tornado Alley. They believed storms contained divine energy that humans were meant to absorb. My mother explained that ancient peoples understood this, but modern society had forgotten the truth. She said I was lucky they'd discovered this knowledge while I was still young enough for my cells to properly adapt. My father added that most people were too weak to handle nature's raw power, but our family bloodline made us special. Every time the weather service issued a watch or warning, they got excited. They'd check their radar apps constantly and wake me up the moment precipitation started. It didn't matter if it was midnight or if I had school the next morning. They'd position me in the exact center of the backyard where they'd installed a metal pole they called a conductor. I had to keep both hands on the pole while the storm passed over. The rules got more extreme as I got older. By age 10, I had to be barefoot to maintain ground connection. By 12, I had to wear special copper bracelets they'd ordered from some website. When I turned 14, they started making me strip down to my underwear regardless of the temperature. They documented everything in journals with detailed notes about wind speed and barometric pressure and how long I lasted outside. The worst night happened during an ice storm when I was 15. The freezing rain had been falling for hours, and they made me stand out there in nothing but shorts. My skin turned blue and I couldn't stop shaking. I begged them to let me inside, but they just watched from the window taking notes. After 2 hours, I collapsed, and they finally dragged me inside. I couldn't feel my fingers or toes and threw up from the cold. They seemed disappointed I hadn't absorbed enough power. At school, I started wearing long sleeves to hide the bruises from hail. Teachers asked about my constant exhaustion, but I made excuses about insomnia. My grades dropped because I couldn't stay awake in class after being outside until dawn. Friends stopped inviting me places because I always had to check the weather forecast first. The breaking point came during my senior year when a tornado warning hit our county. My parents had been preparing for this moment for years. They dressed me in their special storm suit made of metal mesh and positioned me in the backyard as the sirens wailed. The wind was already knocking down tree branches and the sky had turned gray. They went to the basement to watch through the window. I could see the funnel cloud approaching across the fields. For a moment, I stood frozen with my body trained by years of obedience. The wind lifted me off my feet and slammed me into the fence. Blood ran down my face, and I saw my parents through the basement window calmly writing in their journals while I faced death. That's when something inside me finally snapped. I ran to the neighbor's house and pounded on their door screaming for help. The police initially just gave my parents a warning about safety during storms. They claimed religious freedom and said I'd overreacted to a spiritual practice. CPS investigated, but my parents showed them years of documentation proving their nature therapy program. The caseworker seemed ready to close the file. My parents hired a lawyer who argued storm exposure was no different than cold plunge therapy. For weeks, it looked like I'd have to go back home. They even got a judge to grant them supervised visits where they lectured me about abandoning my destiny. Everything changed when the caseworker found photos they'd taken of me unconscious in the ice storm. She also discovered their journals documenting how I'd vomited and lost feeling in my extremities. The court ordered medical exams that revealed nerve damage from cold exposure. My parents were charged with endangerment, and I went to live with my aunt. I testified against them in court, where they still insisted storms held divine power. The judge ordered psychiatric evaluations and banned them from contacting me. I won the case but lost my childhood, and now I need medication to sleep during thunderstorms.